So welcome everybody officially to this evening's almost live virtual VocalEye. Before we get started with tonight's programming, I really just want to acknowledge that VocalEye is broadcasting to us all this evening from the unceded, ancestral, and occupied territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And as every week we join through the magic of Zoom, I invite you to take a moment to explore the lands that you each are settled on in your own time, and to find ways of honoring those lands and those who have taken care of those lands before we arrived, and to this day and through to the future. Also want to just pay acknowledgement to the atrocities and the unmarked graves that have been discovered in the last several weeks, and will continue to be continue to be discovered as we're exploring the grounds of these more than 130 plus previous residential schools in Canada. So acknowledging specifically the 215 in Kamloops, the 751 in Saskatchewan, 189 in Cranbrook, and 160 on Vancouver Island, 1,315 unmarked graves, and unfortunately there will be many more to acknowledge. So welcome this evening, friends, those of you who are joining from Pacific time and time zones in the future. Most of you know me, but if you don't, I'm Amy. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator here at VocalEye, also a community member, and it's August the 4th. This is going to be our 54th episode of Almost Live Virtual VocalEye. I think that's pretty amazing. Tonight, we are going to listen together to an audio play called Night Passing. And I'm going to get into that in a second, but Sharon brought this up before we started. We do have one more event before we go on our sort of summer hiatus. And I'm just going to let all of you know what that event is next week. So next week, it's August 11th. And the event is called A Future for Memory. It's the art and life after the Great East Japan Earthquake. So it is actually going to be curated and described for our virtual tour by our own Steph Kirkland. I'm so excited about that. And our special guest will be joining us as well. So I hope that you all stick around for that, because it's going to be a really interesting, but I think also pulling a bit at our heartstrings as we, follow what it was like during that earthquake and in the aftermath of that earthquake. So that's what's happening next week. And then we will be on hiatus until September the 22nd, when we come back with highlights from the Cinevolution Digital Carnival Z Festival. So that'll also be exciting for our start in the fall. All right, friends, just wanted to quickly say a big thanks to those of you who have made donations and contributions to VocalEye. As you know, we offer this programming free of charge to the community. And so we are running on absolutely no revenue, but we do think it's important to create, to make art accessible and to lower the barrier of not only transportation, which this has done, but also ticket pricing, right? That's a barrier for many of us. So we don't want to charge for this programming. If you feel like you're in a position to make a contribution, we'll post a link in the chat, or you can always visit our website and figure out how you can support VocalEye there. And, folks, another way to support VocalEye is when we send out those post-event surveys. If you have any comments or questions or testimonials or things you loved, that's all great stuff for us to be able to show to our funders in order to continue to get funding. So you can also support that way. All right, let's get into who our guest is tonight. For Night Passing, which is an arts club theater company audio play, we had originally invited Scott Button, who is the playwright of this particular piece, to join us this evening. Now, Scott hopefully will join us for a short Q&A afterwards, but Scott, as a working artist, has gotten himself a TV gig and is right now on set shooting. So we've invited Richard Marion into the space this evening to help us introduce this space. And so, Richard, where are you? You're in a cube somewhere. I'm waiting for you to be screen shared with me. There's your cube. I see your cube. How are you this evening, Richard? Richard's on mute. So for folks who don't know Richard, while he's waiting to unmute himself, I will let you know that he's also a board member for VocalEye. And it's lovely to have it. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Because the host wasn't allowing
the
me to
host
unmute,
wasn't
so.
allowing you, dirty, nasty host. Yeah, so Richard has joined us because, Richard, you're not only a member of our community, but you're also a member of the LGBTQIA2S plus. Did I get all of the letters in there?
Yeah, I think you got it all. It is a mouthful, and it's and I've heard it now said. I was just saying in some Indigenous discussions. So, some people have preferred to start to say 2S LGBTQ UA plus community, and so putting the 2S up front, and it actually seems to flow better that way. So I'm going to try to remember that myself, because the 2S part is to do with Indigenous people who are part of the LGBTQ community, and because it's they believe that people that exhibit a different gender or sexual orientation based on that's different than their physical experience embody both spirits, that the body contains both spirits.
Yeah, and also I have been in some Indigenous spaces where they talk about two-spirit folks being closer to creator. So I think that two-spirit folks have special gifts. So different than I think how some folks who identify as LGBTQ in the Western world have been treated historically, right? Which is actually something that we'll discover in this particular audio.
Audio play, but when the European settlers first arrived in North America, they applied their European perspective on Indigenous practices dealing with people that are two-spirited, and basically, like they did with other cultural practices of Indigenous people, basically removed people from their culture and forced people not to practice those cultures. And because the Indigenous communities were embraced the two-spirited people, and it was quite okay to exhibit, say, traits that might have been different than your physical appearance. It might have been.
Richard, for folks who, this may be a complicated question, but I did a little Google researching and we can get through this together. But the acronym, it's not even an acronym, but the series of letters is quite long. And I wonder if you can unpack some of those letters for folks that don't maybe know what they stand for.
So the L is lesbian. So lesbian was originally basically the idea that two women having same-sex relationships. And then gay was basically the same idea with men. So two men that were sexually interested in each other and had that and maybe exhibited traits in that might have actually been more like a woman, but there was no other sort of nothing. That was the only terminology at one time that was available, was lesbian and gay, and that was it. Then the B came in. People started using that for people that might have basically showed interest in either sex.
So bisexual.
Bisexual, yeah. So they would fall in love with either a man or a woman, depending on what they were, what level of physical or emotional attraction they had to the given person they were with. Transgendered or trans now is more still part of the community that a lot of us don't really understand, and there's still a lot of discrimination for people that are transgendered and trans. That is basically when you feel like say if you're male, but you know in you know that you really should have been a woman, and so then you literally transition to having a gender expression as a woman, and so, or vice versa or whatever. Q is queer. So queer was at one time was a derogatory term, and that's so queer, or you're queer, and it was meant to offend people. But what's happened, I'd say in the last, very recently, maybe in the last 10 to 20 years, is the community has tried to take the word back and use it. So people that are queer celebrate basically everything they are. Like they could be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, asexual. Like there's a whole sort of gamut of basically the queer community. There are some people, just if they say the queer community, it sort of encompasses all the other letters, like especially people that are non-binary and as well too.
And
And
I've also,
non-binary is also basically is you don't have any real set gender
you
expression.
don't identify with gender.
Yeah.
I've also heard the Q being related to queer or questioning.
Queer questioning.
Some people are. So I've met a bunch of folks in spaces that I because, queer is not a word that is a part of a community that I have a lived experience in. And I was curious when I first heard a woman in a heterosexual relationship who used so a heterosexual relationship, but also identified as cisgender. So identified as, she was assigned female at birth and identifies that way. And she referred to herself as queer. And I thought, okay, there's something changing about this word that I am not privy to. So I like the direction this word is going to, the reappropriation of this word. Yeah. Richard, I know there's a lot of other letters that we can talk about in terms of, asexual and intersect, which is part of the A and I, but we're running a little short on time here. So I think maybe what I'd love to transition to is your thoughts on what it is we think we might experience tonight with this audio play. The audio play is quite long. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes. So it is quite long, but it is very focused on, the playwright is a member of the LGBTQ community, local to Vancouver. And this is set in 1958. And so we're talking about a time where it was absolutely discriminated against. And so there's going to be some content in here that could be triggering to folks. I wonder, if you have any thoughts about what you're going to experience going in.
So you're right. This is at a point in time when the federal government at the time used something called the fruit machine to basically force people out in the civil service, the military, the police. And it was a way to, in a lot of ways, eliminate people that were gay and lesbian at the time, or bisexual, and out them. And this is still at a point in time when having same-sex relationships was a criminal offense. At one time it was punishable by death in Canada, but no one ever received the death penalty for it. And actually, the last person to be convicted of crimes of having same-sex relationships was 1965. They were released from prison in 1971, but they were only pardoned in 2016. So that just shows, and so this period of time, people will be living potentially living in fear. I'm assuming they're going to be subject to potentially some violence, and for the people in the play, they thought moving from a small town to a large city would be a lot better, and it probably, from what I've read of the description and what I understand from the time period, it's not going to be that easy. The case. And we've come a long way in basically 60 years, since 1969, when Pierre Trudeau said the state has no business in the bedrooms of the nations. But it really is like we're dealing with only 50 to 60 years. It's not that much time. So it's there a lot of activism and celebration sort of happened between then and now to get to the point where I can walk down the street with my husband holding his hand and celebrate who we are and live anywhere we want in the city of Vancouver, and not have to feel like we could potentially be discriminated against just because we live together as a married couple.
Right. Like everything we talk about, whether it's racism or ableism or LGBTQ community issues, we have come a long way, but there's still a long way to go. Right. Like the conversations are ongoing. It's work we all do for a lifetime, right? If there was a finish line to any of this work, that would be one thing. But I think it's we're asked as human beings to continue doing the work, to embrace who folks are, And with that, I'm really, really excited to share with you all Night Passing by Scott Button. And before I get Rick to hit play on Night Passing, they will remind us this, but just so folks know that there's some mature content in this particular piece. So you may experience some scenes that are sexually graphic or some adult language, certainly going to deal with themes of homophobia and discrimination as well. But I hope you stick through it. It's worth it. It's got a really interesting film noir kind of sound vibe to it. So with that being said, friends, sit back, enjoy, listen, and Rick, hit play on Scott Button's Night Passing. Welcome back, friends. That was Night Passing by Scott Button. And I'll just let y'all know that Scott had emailed me during our listening party here, and sends his deepest regrets and thanks for everybody for listening to his piece. He is stuck on standby on set, so is unable to join us this evening. But we still have Richard with us, and I would love to invite Richard back. And I think maybe what we'll do is we'll do a shortened version, not necessarily a Q&A, but let's just have a little chat. And I invite folks to chime in, use the raise your hand function if you want to share your thoughts and feelings on this. So Richard, I'm going to throw it to you. First off, I have any initial thoughts that jump out at you about what we just listened to here?
I found it very moving. It was upsetting at some points because, and Bill was saying when we were listening to it that he found it uncomfortable in the sense because he moved to Ottawa and basically in some ways found himself in Ottawa. And when he lived there for 5 years after graduating from high school and going to college here for a year or two, and then he went to Carleton University there, and that's where he kind of he came out of his own shell as well. So that part, I think, for him was kind of, but for me, it was the stark reality of what life would have been like that back then, and the fact that they were co-opting queer people to try to out other civil servants and people in the military is quite shocking as well too. And this was happening in Canada along the same time, basically in the same time era that McCarthyism was happening in the States.
I had the privilege of listening to a talk back that Scott Button did when the Arts Club did a sharing of this just amongst staff, and he joined us. So I have a little insight that I can share with folks, and Scott's given me permission to do that. But I wonder about one of the questions that Scott was asked was, and I'm going to ask you this question, Richard, is the ending. Do you feel like it was too easy? In that, Elliot there aren't any huge consequences for Elliot for coming out, right? Like his family still embraces him. He has the love of his life. So, Scott was asked as the writer, why is the ending so easy? What do you think about the ending?
I kind of thought the ending, it seemed easy, but it kind of gave hope for the future, because it appears that the ending might have been at the beginning of the AIDS crisis or pandemic, and because they talked about the number of people that were dying and as well too. So I don't know if you caught that reference, but they didn't specifically say AIDS, and they were together. They'd appeared to have sort of aged together from that time period. It's hard to know if that was really, the ending might have been a foretelling of the AIDS crisis. Like the ending could have been in the 70s or something. Like who knows what time period the ending was actually in, because the beginning of it was in the late 1950s. So
yeah, I think they said 1983.
Yeah, so that's really at the beginning of the AIDS crisis.
Crisis. And you're absolutely right. There is sort of this ... from a community perspective. And Scott had said when this question was posed to him that he wanted it to be this easy, because he wanted to change the narrative, the trope. And that really resonated with me hearing that, because we often talk about the disability trope of, we all have pitiful lives and we're broken people, and then we rise like superheroes, or we overcome barriers. And that's a narrative that we see over and over. And for Scott, he was saying, as a community member, the narrative he sees over and over is that gay folk are devastated and left in ruin, to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives,
and there's so many stories like that like,
right,
where basically it ends tragically, like they either break up or the one person dies or something like that, or and he's right. There's so many stories that end that way, and there's some that end more positively, but those are set in more modern times as well too. Yeah. There's a couple movies I've watched where it's set they're more period pieces in the 70s where it does end more positively, but I can only think of one or two and it's and the one that I watched on Amazon, the name's actually escaping me. It was audio described as well too. So and it did end positively, but it had a real tragic middle as well too, about people committing suicide, and kind of like this, like the people. This was depicted an era where there was a lot of homophobia, and it was institutionalized homophobia in the federal government and the RCMP.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And all according to Scott, and I haven't done the research myself, but factual as to what was actually happening in Canada at that time. So
yeah, I'd say it's fair, because I did when you asked me to do this, I did some research, and because the plot summary doesn't really mention the fruit machine, but that's clearly what it was about.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that one, Richard.
Yeah.
I wonder about sort of maybe less about the content of the story, but what did you feel about it being set in a kind of a film noir? You can almost hear like the dark, rainy street nights. It felt a little bit like an old time radio drama. What did you feel about that kind of audio content?
It did. I kind of liked the feel of it. Like I thought, oh, this is kind of nice to bring back the old radio plays, like it.
Very 1958.
And 1958, it had that. Even with her singing at the Chateau Laurier, it had that kind of like that speakeasy feeling to it, like the smoky jazz lounge singer bit, and it was kind of and just the music that he chose, like it was very pure. Like he chose. The producers chose some really great sort of sound effects and music. Like it really kind of sounded like something that could have been written in that era and presented live in a radio play studio.
I've just changed my virtual background. I had a rainbow colored heart for Pride, and now it's the logo of the Caramella candy, which is a pink logo, and Caramella is written in pink. And kind of a calligraphy writing, and it's the original candy logo. Took me forever to find that, but I did that for the staff party that we had when this was released with the Arts Club. So I thought I'd dig out the caramel. Actually, it was funny. I actually had the privilege of being in the recording room at the Stanley when they did this. I was invited to come and to witness that, which was really interesting. So I'm at, for folks who know the Stanley, it's a very traditional style theater with a raised stage and proscenium style theater seats that go back and then up to a balcony. And so they had all these 5 actors on the stage with plexiglass partitions between each of them. They were 6 feet apart, and they all had a microphone set up. And they were reading from the script. So you don't have to memorize it, but it does have to sound like you aren't reading, which is a very, very difficult thing to do when you're recording. But Caramella was one of the hardest things for the actor playing Elliot to say. He couldn't get it right at first, over and over and over again. And it was so, we started to joke about a gag reel at that point because it was so funny. And then of course there are some very intimate scenes that he had to perform in front of everybody.
And
he said, no feedback, please.
Yeah, like that night that he was when he first met Alexandro, and he went home and had the caramel. I'm thinking, okay, if you're sitting in a sound studio and you're performing that scene, that definitely shows that he's like good acting skill, because if he could just sit in a sound studio and really make it sound like that he was like orgasming, it for lack of a better term,
Yeah, yeah.
over his feelings for Alexandro at the time when he was eating the candy.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
that
it
was
was really a unique experience to witness. And it was interesting because originally we had the actor that played Dad, or Walter, was playing the telephone operator at the beginning of the play, of the audio play, and his voice is just too recognizable. So he couldn't disguise his voice. And again, like, you're watching an actor trying 100 times to change his voice for that, handful of lines. And it was just too recognizable because it's creepy. He is so creepy.
He is creepy.
As Walter Dad, right? And so did that resonate for you in that character? Like, I felt creeped out through the whole thing.
He was creepy, and then I think when he woke up in the police station and he showed up as the cop, I realized right away, oh, that's Dad. That's the same guy. Like, there's no hiding it until even before the main character came to the realization that it was Walter Dad.
We recognized the voice right away. Yeah. It's a pretty iconic voice, and sometimes I wonder if he's out in the world, picking up his laundry or going to the bank. If somebody's heard this, they're gonna be like, what? I recognize that voice. Richard, what do you think about the revenge at the end of the piece? How they kind of flip the script on Dad/Walter.
I don't know if that really would have, like, that probably wouldn't have happened, but like that. But I think it because what ended the fruit machine and various activities like that was public pressure on the government. The fact that even what we now think of as conservative publications, Maclean's magazine, started writing editorial pieces against same-sex acts being criminal offenses and things like that. And so I don't know if that would have happened like that, but it was
I'm sure
a good
that's
sort of it was a good sort of a turn of events for basically what turned out to be kind of that, which made it had that sort of suspense mystery feel to it as well too.
It very well could have been the poetic license moment. However, I felt like it was really satisfying. Right? Like, there was this moment where I was kind of like, yes, like, we got a win here, right? So that moment for me was really satisfying.
Yeah, because I actually kind of thought Walter was gonna probably kill him when he realized that he had recording equipment. So but when they actually got there in time and sort of stopped it and turned it around, that facilitated the happy ending, because I was kind of going to that usual sort of ending for a lot of these sort of gay love stories where someone dies at the end or someone gets seriously hurt.
Yes, absolutely. Any other, because you did some research into this time period, and so I'd love to just give you the opportunity to share a little, and folks, if you want to again raise your hands and join the conversation and share what resonated with this piece, what didn't, if you enjoyed it, all those kinds of things, we are certainly welcoming that into the conversation.
Go ahead, Richard. So the thing that resonated for me with the research I did at the time was that, like, 1948 and then 1961, they actually changed the criminal code to basically declare the act of gross indecency, like basically to make gay men seem like they were psychotic and predatory as well too. And then in 1965, when the last person was convicted under the criminal code to life in prison, basically for gross indecency, and because they were baited by the police in the Northwest Territories into basically ending up in prison. That's when the public attitude started to change, and of course the government eventually introduced changes to the criminal code in 1967 and passed by Pierre Trudeau in 1969. So to decriminalize same-sex relationships, and so that's it kind of, I think, was just sort of the beginning of what turned into a pride/protest movement, and through the 70s, and of course but think it's been a long struggle, and I like it was yeah, like I didn't find a lot of statistical information, but the fruit machine, for instance, 9,000 people were outed because of the fruit machine in the civil service. And the military didn't change their our version of don't ask, don't tell until 1992.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of antiquated laws in place.
Yeah.
Louise has her hand up. So Louise, why don't you share your thoughts, or I don't know if you have a question, but certainly you can unmute yourself and share your thoughts. Let's give Louise a moment to unmute. Yeah, it's really incredible, Richard, when we think about these kind of antiquated laws and how they don't get sort of addressed until like way after the fact, right? Sorry, Louise, go ahead.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, tonight was, and I've known a lot about the community in many ways, but I learned a lot tonight. But I actually felt for Elliot and trying his struggles, the struggles he went through, and knowing what could happen to him when he lost his job and everything. My heart broke.
Yeah.
This society shouldn't treat anybody this way. And I'm glad the changes are there now. But yes, when he said 1983, I realized about the AIDS, or most likely is what he was talking about, HIV and that. Yeah. I've lost a lot of dear friends to that, and it's a sad part of life. The community has and the government, I'm glad the government changed the laws, but to realize the history of this, and most likely there was a lot more we could hear, and it came out in a really unique story. I really am grateful. I'm really grateful it came tonight, because it really enriched my life. And the fact, and what I understood and learned. And I know a lot, because I've been in the community, around the community so much in my life. Well, since late, I guess 1990. So, but it really touched me tonight in a way that understanding the back history and figured out the back history. So my thoughts is that, how, if it was like that then, what was it like back in 1800s and early 1900s?
Yeah.
And Louise is right. Like, a lot of people, like, if you were outed, that was the immediate reaction. You lost your job. You might have been evicted from your premises, because there was nothing protecting you. Like, it was only 1977. Quebec was the first province to put sexual orientation in their human rights codes. But gender expression is more recent. Like, a lot of places only in the 90s and the 2000s, including gender expression in their human rights codes as well too. So it's and like it's been a long. So prior to that, there was nothing. So like, yeah, you could be evicted because you were gay, or you could lose your job. And even nowadays, like today, older people that are from that era may, like, they don't want to out themselves, and sometimes they've lived as people that are out, and they'll go into seniors homes and recloset themselves, because they're just they're automatically fearful that they're going to lose their support services.
Yes, I have heard that, actually. Thank you for that. We've got a hand from Tilo and Yuko, and then I think we'll draw this conversation to a close, friends. Go ahead, Tilo and Yuko. One of you. Let's give you a chance to unmute. I think we got you. Yeah, we got you.
Oh, it was Tilo. I didn't hear the name. That's why I was waiting.
Sorry, Tilo.
This was quite interesting, this story, and about the frame up and the things that can happen. In other countries, they treat gay and lesbians different. And it's a lot of times it's not very good. I'm glad a lot of things have changed, and also I'm glad there's more political correct words to address things like this. From every culture, they have somebody like this, and they treat them different or bad, or they expect them to be the same as everybody else, and nobody's the same as everybody else. We're all different. We're all individual, and this is the way we should be treated as an individual on our individual. How would you say our actions? We should be judged by our actions and not the way we think or who we want to be with. And unfortunately, society thinks different. So I'm very glad you brought this out and up. I'm always interested to hear new things about subjects that I don't really know anything about, but some friends that I've known have told me some things, and it's through their perspective. Some I know have been abused, some had some tragedy that happened that they end up being a lesbian or a gay, or maybe from when they're born in that, and they realize they are, and it's always so hard for anybody to come out and say exactly who they are. I am this, I am that, and have society not to judge. And then some people seem to find a niche in a way, and they are accepted quite well. So that is my comment.
It's an interesting point. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Tilo. Yeah. Friends, Canada's got some dirty little secrets, and these are not things that we were taught. I certainly wasn't taught about this kind of history in school. I think a lot of times we closet this kind of history, no pun intended. So it is interesting when content like this comes up that sort of bridges the gap between some history and some poetic license. Gosh, time flies, friends, and this was a long one. So thanks for folks who have stuck in this long. And Richard, why don't we do a draw? I don't know. What do you think?
Why don't we do the draw?
Let's do a draw.
Definitely.
All right, let's bring Sarah out. And Richard, I always ask every guest, so you're no different, to think of a word other than the boring old stop that you can yell out when you want Sarah to draw a name.
Even though it's a couple days after the end of Pride Week, how about I'll say Pride.
I think that's fantastic. All right, Sarah, I'm going to leave you and Richard to do the draw.
Hi, Richard. Whenever you're ready, please say the magic word.
Okay. Pride.
Cool. So our winner is Linda Hunt.
Linda.
Oh, congratulations, Linda. If you're still
got
here.
Linda on the line, just double checking. Sarah, you're probably faster than I am. Linda, are you with us? Chime in if you're with us. I see the name. I see Linda on the line. Okay, wonderful, Linda. Well, we'll connect with you outside of this particular event and get you your raffle prize. Friends, thanks so much for sticking around tonight and listening to Night Passing by Scott Button and with Richard Marion, our special guest. That'll be the end of our evening. But again, if anybody wants to stick around for another short social, just about 10 minutes, we'll keep the line open and folks can unmute themselves and chit chat away. Thanks so much, Richard, for being a part of tonight's event in a formal capacity.
Yeah, thanks. No problem. I really enjoyed it.